Going live.
Good evening and welcome to our monthly live threaded collective Q&A. My name is Adrienne Garrison and I'll be your host for the evening. Threaded is an organization that helps people like you effectively bring the love of Christ to racial conflict and conversations. We know that racial conversation is a minefield, so we created this space to help talk through some questions and concerns that you have. Joining me for our November live Q&A is Marcus Lloyd, Threaded Director and co-host of Colored Commentary podcast, and special guest Oscar Perez, pastor of Vivid Life Church in Plano. Hi guys, how you doing tonight?
Hey, what's happening, Adrienne? Glad to be here as always. Glad to have my boy Oscar in the house today.
I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. Oscar, is this space make you nervous coming in here? You feel good?
No, I'm good. You could just shoot the hardest questions at me and I will avoid them as best I can.
I know it was a trap question. You're avoiding the best you can. Fair enough. Okay. Fair enough, right? Like that makes a lot of sense.
It's a busy week, but thank you for taking the time to connect with us ahead of what could be some tense conversations over Thanksgiving dinner. Marcus and Oscar, can you just get us started by sharing what you're looking forward to this holiday, as well as the kind of conversations that you are gearing up to have around the table?
Man, great question. Man, here's what's funny is I don't know if I've spent time looking forward to anything. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of, and I'll say it like this, I've been married, it'll be 20 years in December. And so like most people, I kind of go back and forth between my family and my wife's family. And I love my wife's family. I love them, right? But I see them pretty regularly, right? And so it's not like I'm gearing up like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to see everybody. It's going to be great. Like I do with my family because they live, in a different city. So I don't know if I look forward to it. And just, this is my wife, I'm not going to tell the full story. My wife always gets on me to tell the story, but her family just eats differently than my family. Like from a cultural standpoint, like there's just different things going on. So my family, it's not, people are bringing in all kinds of food. It's crazy. Her family is like catering Thanksgiving. So I don't know what I'm getting food wise. So I haven't looked forward to that. But so I guess if I'm looking forward to something, and this is a nudge against Antoine, I'm looking forward to watching the Cowboys beat the Raiders. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Think
for
it's
sure.
Gonna happen?
I don't know. Hey, after this last weekend, I think it may not. So that being said, I'm always gearing up for conversations. I think again, because I am going to be with my wife's family. Those of you who don't know, my wife is white. And so there's just certain thought processes that exist on her side of the family. They're white and have ultimately been very affluent their whole lives. And so there's just different conversations that kind of come in. There's going to be talk, I'm sure, about, politics. There may be some CRT things thrown out. People know what I do, but they don't know all of what I do. So sometimes I'll just say stuff and they don't know. But that's kind of where I am. Yeah, thanks for asking.
That's cool. Well, I know people are not going to ask me any questions at my house because they already know what I do.
Are you hanging with your folks? Are you with your folks?
We're going to have dinner at my parents' house, which they live here in Garland as well.
Yeah,
I live
right there.
Literally just 5 minutes away from where I live, which is great. So, and the fact is that even though they live so close, I don't hang out with them as much as I'd like to. They come to the church with us. They do life together at church. But when it comes to family stuff, we're always running around. And this is going to be a great opportunity for us just to stop and just hang out. And this is actually a very special Thanksgiving for us because it's the first year, I think, that I'm not throwing a fit over the traditional meal.
Wait, throwing a fit?
So so you have this image of the traditional Thanksgiving meal, right? You have that picture of the turkey, the ham, and all this stuff.
Sure.
And I'm always trying to achieve that. But my parents are like, we're Mexican. It's like, what are we? It's like, they'll ask the question, what do you guys want to have for Thanksgiving? This is the first year I said, whatever you guys want. And it's like, before I would say, like, what do you mean? It's like, it's turkey, ham, it's these are the standards. Now it's like, what do you want to eat? Just whatever you want. As long as we get to hang out, just eat some good dessert.
Wow.
We're going to be great. I'm not throwing a fit over anything on the menu.
Wow. You're like in a Zen place right now, Oscar, about
It's
this.
all
I'm really impressed.
It's a Zen place. It's all the counseling I've received in the past few months.
That's what I'm saying.
It's kicking
I love
in.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it because I've known Oscar for a while. This is good. This is progress. I'm really excited about the progress you're making in this.
I'm just going to go with the flow, whatever they want to bring.
If you're looking for an
That's funny.
upside over these last few years, it has put some things into perspective for us, right?
Yes.
Like, whatever you want to eat, like I'm totally here for that. Yeah, I am going to my in-laws this year, and I'm so excited for my mother-in-law makes homemade chicken and noodles. I'm really excited for that. And I think, being, in these predominant white spaces, you still, like, most of I feel like Thanksgivings are still under that paradigm of, like, you don't discuss religion, politics, or money.
Sure.
And, when you're not hurting in any of those areas, it's easy to avoid it. And I think going to my in-laws, they're a little more willing to break those rules, and I'm definitely here for the conversation tonight, literally taking notes, ready for this, because there's a question down here that I think this person might know my father-in-law that's asked this question. So I am so here for it. Are you guys ready to kick it off?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. That's fun.
The first question is specific to the holiday Thanksgiving. It's this. Over the last few years, I've been hearing more about the truth of Thanksgiving, which is different than the story I was told about Pilgrims and Native Americans sharing meals together. Is it insulting to Native Americans to participate in Thanksgiving? Should we not even do this holiday anymore?
That's a really good question.
Oscar, you're the guest here. I mean,
you want me to go in? I'll go.
Any gut thoughts? I mean,
Here's what runs through my mind. Just listening. Obviously, I just heard this question for the first time, so I haven't processed anything. But here's what I would say: it's an opportunity to be sensitive to everyone, and you have to walk into the holiday tradition honoring absolutely everyone. And if you have to just somehow break your traditions to bring others to the table and have them feel comfortable, I think that's the main purpose of this holiday. So I think conversations are needed a little bit more than ever to understand our brothers and sisters all across the board so that we could accommodate and really do a good job with this holiday. But I think there's space in this holiday, in this tradition, for us to spin it into the regards of, what does my faith say I should be doing in a meal, in a gathering like this? And if Jesus actually took his clothes off, literally wrapped a towel around his waist and served other people, we shouldn't be worried too much about the turkey or the ham or whatever. We should be maybe looking about the centerpiece of servanthood in our dinners. So that's my take, but I haven't processed this properly.
Well, hey, I like that. I think what I like about your response is you have this sort of recognition that taking a moment in our society to sit and give thanks for the plentiful bounty, right? Which, I mean, you can utilize that terminology any way you want, but the plentiful bounty in our lives, I think that's just a really wonderful practice, a practice of Thanksgiving. It's a kind of liturgy I think that the church really should be practicing and has practiced for centuries. And I think doing that is beautiful. And, I think once you look at, I think you can look at not a lot of holidays, but there's holidays out there that you can look at and you can find some history that's not really all that wonderful behind it. And some of that has been reclaimed for good things. I mean, like we'll probably do one on Christmas, right? Like Christmas has some, at least the sort of the westernized version of Christmas has some, ex-pagan aspects of it, right? And so, but we've reclaimed it and been able to, for the most part, censor it on Jesus, right? So I think it's wonderful to have the holiday of Thanksgiving. And to your point too, Oscar, which I thought was great, is the sensitivity to recognize that there is a way in which this history of Thanksgiving has been told that's actually more myth than truth. And to recognize that own that, lament that, but then try to reclaim it for something positive would be great. I know, we've had on our show several times Mark Charles, who's written a book, Unsettling Truths, with Dr. Soong-Chan Rah. And he's got a couple of videos. Mark Charles has a couple of videos out there. You can check it out on YouTube. Just look up Mark Charles and Thanksgiving. He is a Christian who's a Navajo Native American. And he just has some pretty good insight as far as where possibly some Native Americans think about the holiday and engage, and even how he's engaged. And so I think that's probably a great place to kind of hear, maybe like, is it insensitive to Native Americans? I can't speak to that, but I just know that that's a place that you'll hear some of that. I do know that for us, if in my places where I go, because I've been a pastor for so long, like I'm always praying wherever I am, like no matter what Thanksgiving I'm at, like it's like, hey, Marcus is a pastor, you pray. So I like to fold that into the prayer, right? To be like, hey, I know, God, we know that this holiday has its history and so on and so forth, but we're grateful that even in the midst of terrible injustice, if you will, that we can find a reason to gather as a country collectively and thank you for certain things. Now, the response is the repentance. It's like, okay, so what do we do going forward to make sure that we don't perpetrate more myths in the midst of it? So yeah, that's helpful for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I appreciate that concept of weaving it into prayer. And I think.
And can I say, sorry, real quick, that balance of, say, truth, right, and I don't even know what the other grace, I don't know, that balance is almost the full definition of what shalom looks like, right? Like peace, because it's hard to have peace when you haven't told the truth about a situation. You know what I mean? Like if you're sitting at Thanksgiving, that this is not about it's not the myth of the Pilgrims and the Native Americans. The genocide that happened and all those things, but you're not like bringing that up. Then what you do is you open yourself up to somebody bringing it up for you, and then in some ways condemning you for not bringing it up, right? Which is not always the way to do it, but it may happen. When you bring it up first and you acknowledge it and you lament it and you confess it, then you can breathe, because the injustice has actually been brought to the space and we're reminded of it. And then we can move forward going, okay, we all recognize that this came from this place, but we want to do something different, correct? Fantastic. Let's move forward in true peace. So that's where I think that true term of shalom and peace comes from.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I think that that's almost universal when we find ourselves in those places where we may not have the exact right words, and we want to name something and hold space for something, and we're not exactly sure how. Lifting it up in prayer, in public prayer, is a beautiful way to do that, and particularly bringing in lament and letting the Spirit say what we can't say, and make space to move hearts and guide conversation as a result of that. I really, really love that.
That's good.
Here's our next question. I am the only one.
Oh, and just while you're doing questions, look, if you're watching, if you got questions about Thanksgiving, I see we got some folks on the chat that are engaging. I love that. Yeah, just throw it in there. We want to be, this is a show that's for you, the folks who are listening. So we're trying to guide in the best way we can and how to maneuver through some of these racial things, and man, throw questions at us and then we'll see what we can do with that. Sorry, Adrian.
No, thank you. I meant to say that. Please do drop your questions in the chat. We really would love to have an actual dialogue with you if you're here, and thanks for showing up. So this question is for people who are the only one in their family who sees problems around race, so far as they know. Okay. And when we get together, they're always speaking about how ridiculous race and CRT are. And this person wants to be helpful, but they're outnumbered and they don't want to fight. And they would like to know if you have any silver bullets.
Yes, we have a bag of them. We've been just holding out on everybody on what to do. I'll start this one, Oscar, and then you can clean my stuff up. I don't know if there's any silver bullets, because every situation is going to be different, right? I don't know who the people are you're dealing with. I don't know the danger you're in, right, in the midst of it, sort of emotionally or physically even. But I do know that there's nothing better to diffuse certain conversations than really well-placed questions. You know what I mean? Like, it's like if you're having somebody going, this whole CRT thing is the worst. We've seen many cases, right? Even some that go viral of where people go, oh, that's interesting. What is CRT? Right. And then people have to like go after it if they haven't really been very thoughtful about it, which a lot of people have not. And so asking that question to get more clarity for who or who you're talking about, what you're talking about is going to be helpful. Even as people are generalizing other races in their conversation, some of the question is, that's interesting. Like, where did you learn that about that race? Where did you learn that? And so they can articulate, oh, I was watching X news station and this is what they said, or I was reading X book or watching X TV. I was like, oh, so do you know anybody from that racial group at all? And you react accordingly, but you just kind of keep the questions coming. What it does is, again, it allows them to kind of be able to kind of guide the conversation. And it's not fighting, it's questioning, right? Now, some of the questions can be loaded, so you have to be careful, right? But I think if you're just genuinely curious about people's thought processes and why they got there, I think that can be a kind of silver bullet where you don't have to fight. You just allow yourself to learn in that space of what it is that people are struggling with, so you know what to bring and what to study. So if those conversations come up again, you can be more, well-versed in it. So that's my thought. Oscar, you got anything on that?
I kind of want to remember that I never, if you think about it, where I was 5 years ago, where we were first having these conversations, there was a lot of ignorance in my part in regards to the whole field of this conversation. And some of these folks you're going to encounter that have maybe a voice or an opinion, whatever you want to call it, may be in that same stage you were 5 years ago. Extend grace to them, and their ignorance was once your ignorance. And it takes a journey. And if you could model the gospel in this journey, I think you'll be more effective than the words you could actually speak sometimes. So in the case of our family, we're Hispanic. So I'm second generation immigrant, which means that my parents were the first immigrants that came to this country from Mexico. And the best thing I can do is not speak about it, but act on it. Who am I bringing to the table? Am I inviting a friend? Am I inviting folks that are from different nationalities or different cultures into our gathering so that they could experience the same love I'm experiencing around that dinner table? So maybe the best apologetics I could bring to the table is acting on the faith that I have and not just pointing out some of the things that they need to grow in, especially in the culture that I move in. Some folks have never heard of CRT. They don't know what it is. So it would be kind of foolish for me to bring it up in a conversation and asking them, what do you think about this? It's probably not the safest place, because it's gonna hit them as them being ignorant. And that's not what we want to portray. So I just try to be a little bit more careful with the way I demonstrate this, opposed to just have a response to this or have an opinion about this.
That's good. And it's interesting you're saying it too. You said something that made me think is, nobody believes that they're wrong about this. Nobody believes they're wrong. And nobody sees themselves as the villain in the midst of it. Everybody sees themselves as the hero in the story. And so what you have to understand is, when you go into the situations and you openly disagree with someone in public, you are igniting all the things in them that will turn into a complete defensive, right? Because they don't think they're wrong and they don't think they're a villain, and you're in some ways articulated that they might be. And so most people don't respond well to that, like public humiliation or public, questioning, particularly if there's someone who's older than you, like one of your elders, right? Like, they just don't respond well. I don't know any culture where that really goes over well. So there's a recognition of that too. Like, is this the time to do it, right? Is there a more private space that you can maybe go to? Maybe you don't respond to it, but obviously there are times where you're like, look, I got to stop this because this is out of control. And it might require you to step up and go, this is ridiculous, this is wrong, because that's what's needed too sometimes, just to go, no, this is wrong. We're not doing this here, right? You may have to maneuver, remove yourself from the space, but in many cases, it may just be, okay, I'm not going to laugh at this, or I'm not going to justify this, or I'm not going to affirm this. And then I'm going to go to that person later and I'm going to go, tell me again, back to the question, hey, tell me why you said that at dinner. Like, let's talk about that. So those are some things too. But I love what you're saying, Oscar, right? Like, remember where we were in our journey, and that people are on that journey together. That's the grace extending of our values and threaded.
Yes. I agree. And I love that. I feel like everything that Threaded puts out is just so steeped in the gospel and grace and humility. And it's been so helpful to me because, and also helpful to remember that even if you say the right thing, you can't control how it's going to be received. And so to some extent, we have to act on the conviction that the Lord has placed in us and do so with as much grace and humility as we can. Like I think that I've encountered plenty of times where, out of curiosity and a deep desire to really understand where someone has come from, I have tried to work with this tendency of non-specific language in white communities and white church communities in particular. They'll say, I've encountered things where they're like, that issue, we have to be careful when we talk about this. And I'm like, just even a question as simple as, I would love to understand what you mean when you say that issue. Even a question as simple as that can really incite deep feelings to be questioned at all. And it's, I just have to trust that, trust the Spirit to guide me in the thing that, that even like that can be enough pressure for that person, and knowing when to stop. But it also, for me as a woman, like being so socialized to avoid conflict, I have to sort of take some deep breaths and not let myself get stopped, just by a poor reaction, because it usually is reflecting more on like the work that's happening inside of them than anything I've done.
Yeah. And look, and you mentioned something there, that if there is a silver bullet to this, is that we do have access to the Spirit of God, right? The discernment of God. So there is this point where, that might be required of just like taking a breath and really sort of taking stock of like, what is God asking me to do here? You know what I mean? Is this a moment? Is this a moment that he says, you're here for such a time as this, right? Or is this what, I'm going to allow these things to roll through, because to say things might actually create a situation that is unsafe or whatever it may be. But trusting the Spirit of God to lead you. And what that means is you have to go into Thanksgiving kind of filled up with the Spirit. You have to be ready to go in and go, God, I want to represent you well today. So help me do that. So I appreciate you articulating that, Adrian. That's a good.
Well, you guys are filling us up today with some good.
As are you. So let's just be clear, like you are as well. So
let's go to the next one. Let's talk about racial or ethnically degrading conversation areas. This is gonna, they're saying that this tends to happen anyway, but speaking up when this happens. Now, somebody's done some work, they're ready, they are going in knowing that this is the year that I'm not going to say nothing, I'm going to say something, but it's hard and scary. So have you ever had to do that, and how did it go?
Oscar, you had to do that at your home?
Yeah, in certain situations. Yeah, absolutely. And one of the mistakes I've always made is try to have that conversation in front of other people when it should be a private one. I think it's okay to pull someone aside and say, I'm going to buy you lunch, as you just mentioned, help me understand that, and I think that, we live in a society that we're accustomed to throwing jabs at one another in one way or another. It could be through social media posts, or maybe just through brief, things that you mention in front of other people. And we are expected to take everything in the gut and still stand. Right. It's not always going to help, it's not always going to work. And it's okay to pull someone aside, I think, and say, hey, you know what, help me understand when you said that, if you're jabbing at me, what were you trying to get to? Because did I say something prior to this that provoked something? What's going on here? So that you could heal that relationship if there is some kind of a division or something. Or do you get to the point where it's maybe a conversation to be had? Maybe this perspective of his or hers is different from yours, and the values you have. And now you get to express why you do the work you do, why you fight or advocate for the things you advocate. And if they just don't still respect it, there's points where you got to be okay with people not agreeing with everything you say or do. I wouldn't do any of this stuff in public where you're like, hey, you ring your glass, I have something to say, Like, no, you don't do that. Maybe you know, over by the conversation or by the fireplace or something, you could probably bring something up. Don't say it in public because you're going to humiliate that person. And if he's already saying something negative, it's probably in his nature to respond aggressively. So you're just asking for it. You know,
Yeah.
pull them aside and say, hey, I just really want to understand this. And if they're not willing to, there's only, you have to kind of meet in the middle of the bridge, right? If they're not willing to come to your end of the bridge, you know, to the point where you're standing, you know, maybe it's not the right time for that conversation to take place. You can't chase them down and have the conversation. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
The person won't be receptive, and some of the feedback is going to be really harmful for the relationship. You're going to have a social gauge that is wise enough to understand when's the right moment to bring it up, I think.
I want to fine tune this question, if you don't mind, Marcus, because I love this emphasis on personal relationship that Oscar is reminding us of. And I think that it is so true. And it's a great challenge for me because to me, I think I'm pre-programmed with the right thing to do is to speak up in the moment publicly at a wrong. And I think that's very much because where I'm coming from, because if there's something racially or ethnically degrading said, it's not going to be about me in the context. And so just as I go forward with this question, I love that you would, you know, pull someone aside later and address it with them. But in my particular context, I think in a lot of people's context that are joining us tonight, we're thinking about multi-generational spaces where there are probably young people present and there's something said. And just is there something, you know, to say as a placeholder in the moment before you do that relational kind of more meaningful work, just to speak up in the face of injustice, you know, as it's being absorbed by younger people in particular?
Yeah, I think that's a great fine tuning. Because we are right now in a period of time where people are, they're becoming more, they're just wanting to make sure that whatever the injustice was historically is not going to get a foothold again. And so when they smell anything close to it, they're ready to jump right on it. And I think there's something really wonderful about that. You know, because you kind of go, gosh, I wish people would have done that back when there was injustice being done, like to the Native Americans, and we wouldn't be here in some ways. So I'm all in on that. I do think, again, there's this way in which you have to engage, you have to understand the situation. You have to understand that the decisions you make have consequences. And I think, look, there are times that I have not had a problem with the consequences, because the injustice and what's going on is so blatant and so easy to kind of step into from I would say almost like a moral space of like, regardless of whether you're talking about somebody because of the race or whatever, we ought to know that God doesn't like when we do that to anybody. So for me in that space, I'll go back to, I ask the question, like I drop a question in there to make it more public. Because then what it allows, again, allows the person, if they said it incorrectly, they get a chance to restate it, right? They get a chance to redo it. So again, my space is, I'm going in with the question. Now, again, I don't know people's context. If somebody's running around in the house that I'm in and they're yelling the N-word, like, I'm like, hey, hold up. We're not saying that in here today. Like, that's not what this is about. This is not that kind of space. We're not doing that. If people are, I'm trying to think of, I was in a situation, this wasn't family, but it's with, you know, a group of guys that I was kind of doing some book clubs with or whatnot. And they were, one of the folks were like, you know, I just think that Black people are just more prone to criminality. You know, that's just kind of who they are. And that's not a spot where I'm like, let me take this person aside and have a conversation, right? That was like, so, or is it all Black people that are prone to criminality? Right? He's like, well, I don't know, because I was like, because I'm here, and am I prone to criminality? Is that what you're articulating? And so I stood up for Black people and ultimately myself in that situation, but it was with a question to get like clarity, because when people say something as overtly, I would call it racist as that, it's hard to even believe that it's being said. right? Because you're just going, surely nobody really means that. So I asked the question for clarity. So I guess all of that mumbling to kind of go and say, ask the question for clarity so that you know that if you're gonna push the TNT in the room, make sure that you have something to blow up and that it's not just a misunderstanding, right? And to you asked very specifically, I think the question was, has this ever happened to me? And I mentioned something that was not family, but I've had situations and where and I'll say it's because, again, I'm in an interracial relationship, so I've been at my in-laws' house, and I had actually a Thanksgiving that was probably maybe 4 years ago or so. One of my wife's relatives brought a boyfriend to the deal, and I was just in the kitchen. Brother was just trying to get some apps. Like, I was just minding my own business, right? Like, I don't know. And my mother-in-law's having a conversation with this dude, and she's like, Marcus, what do you think about Obama? And I was like, are you really doing this to me right now? And it opened up this conversation that was, by all intents and purposes, it was a very a conversation in which two people were diametrically opposed in the midst of the conversation, but it was done with a lot of, for me, questioning, and a lot of it in that question was kind of tearing down different things, and it was calling out places in which there was some gaslighting going on. I think there was a point in which he said, Black people didn't need Barack Obama to be their president to kind of go. And I said, are you speaking for Black people right now? Like, is that like, are you saying that that's what I should be thinking? Are you telling me that I should be thinking this? Isn't it interesting that you're telling me how to think about certain things, right? And so we had a convo, and it was heated, but it was actually still muted. Like, the rest of the family was around the corner, and they didn't know we had the convo. Oh. And incidentally, the relative that was dating this person dumped this person.
I was going to say, if he was a boyfriend. Clearly
yeah, exactly. So it was not a relative. It was a boyfriend that dropped in, and they didn't last. After literally the next day, this person didn't make it. So wow. I don't know if I had anything to do with that, but didn't make it the next day. So.
Hey, let me add something to that, because I think it's important that we do consider this. You should stand up and have a conversation. If it's like a comment like that, you should bring it up. You should stand your ground. You should do something so that people know.
Oh, you said stand your ground. I don't know if we can say that on here. There's some implications. No,
we can't do that.
No, it's just I'm making reference to like the not Tamir Rice. Anyway, don't worry about it. It's a bad joke. Keep moving. Just keep moving, Oscar.
Okay,
we're not ready for that kind of humor, Marcus. Wait till after the commercial break.
Fair enough.
But here's what I wanted to say, because what you just said is important. I think it's important that you have an opportunity, because if they value you enough to bring you over for Thanksgiving, they're going to value your opinion as well. And you're going to be able to say, hey, I've had other experiences, or I have a different perspective. And that may be just enough sometimes. And I know that sometimes we're trying to resolve deep, profound belief systems in a moment. But if God has entrusted you with that relationship so that you could continuously go back and touch on that, and then maybe remodify some of that conversation along the course of maybe a month or whatever you want to extend it into, it's a beautiful opportunity that God has given you. So don't think that you're going to resolve this issue just because you said something. You're not Jesus breaking, bread and pouring wine into the cup and passing it around the dinner table in that moment. You're just another bystander that could maybe shift the belief system of someone else, and it may take a little bit more time. And if you legitimately love them, we'll love them through the process.
Yeah.
That's my take on
it. Look, I love that. I think we do want to kind of take care of it in the moment. But there's this sense, at least what you're talking about, we have more opportunity because we're in relationship with folks. So there's opportunity to chip away as opposed to just knock it out. Well, that's good.
I agree. And I totally see Christ in that, Oscar. And I'm so glad that you're putting this emphasis on the relationship and ongoing relationship, and the fact that God has put us in that person's life, put that person in our life for the opportunity to love them and love them in truth and wholeness, and desire God's best for them. And I just found this particular piece of the conversation, this question, so interesting. Just as a white millennial, I think that we many of us, just have sat through so much complacency and things that have been said, and no one has spoken up. And I think that when it's like my ears are almost tuned in and ringing for something to be said so that I can finally, utilize all that I've had to re-educate in myself. Sure. And I just so appreciate the challenge to recall, how did Jesus treat people? He was fully with the people he was with. And my Instagram followers are not with me in that moment. They're not vetting me. They're not waiting to see if I do the right thing in that moment. Like, I need to be Christ in that moment. And, that includes, for me, the younger people at the table. I love the idea of diffusing it with a question, just poking a hole in that with a question, and just providing, that this is not fact, this is opinion, just by putting forth a question, but caring enough to follow up and say, talk to me about that. Or, I'm a little concerned about that. I want to know more. Caring enough to do that, and not just thinking about one's own convictions, is very Christ-like. And I appreciate that challenge a lot.
Well, and I think a great, there's a couple of different stories, obviously, through the Gospels where you see Christ do that, because he's attacked quite a bit, mostly by the religious folk, right? And they come, and I think, the story of the Good Samaritan is one where they're just like, hey, what's the greatest commandment? They came there hoping to catch him in a problem, right? They're trying to trap him. And what did he respond? He's like, well, what do you think it is? Right. It's like, love God with all your heart and all your soul, love your neighbor as yourself. Fantastic. Go and do that. I'll see you. Wait. But who is my neighbor, Jesus? Okay. All right. Let me tell you a story real quick. And then he tells the story. And at the end of the story, he goes, which one of these two or these people acted as a neighbor to this person? Right. And they had to kind of figure it out themselves. I know they were hot about it. They were so angry, because Jesus didn't have to get hot about it. And there's something in that we got to learn from Jesus, is like, he was confident in the truth of what he believed. So he didn't feel like he had to kind of scorch earth every time somebody came at him in which they didn't like what he was talking about. A lot of times he'd just be like, hey, this is what I believe about it, and you can take it or leave it, right? Rich young ruler, hey, what do I need to get in the kingdom of heaven, right? He's like, we'll do this and this and this, or just do this. He's like, I don't like doing it. Okay, well, I don't know what to tell you, bro. And he walks off. So there's a great, great aspect for, we're seeing that in Jesus's world as well.
Here's another Jesus story, which is phenomenal.
Oh, the pastors. I love it. We're in it now.
Oh, you got two pastors here that just can go at it, right? But here's the thing. It's so important, because they bring a woman who was caught in adultery, and they're like gonna kill her. They're gearing up, and they're like, what should we do? And Jesus doesn't do anything, but he gets down to the ground and he starts writing something on the dirt. And here's the thing, the beauty of it is that, and it taught me so much in regards to my anxiety and trying to do ministry effectively, and so much, sometimes the demand of other people's, what are you going to do, will drive us so nuts. When we have Christ inside of us, we have the same spirit that says, let me take a moment and think through this process. Let me slow down the clock here and not just be so quick to respond. And then he gets up and he's like, I'll ask you this.
Yeah, there's the question.
And there's the punchline is like, and everybody drops their stones and they walk away. And Jesus is like, yeah, we're cool. Problem solved. He had the response before they asked the question. It's, how do you respond? Are you quick? Are you really quick? What are you trying to prove? Are you trying to download all the information, every book on CRT that you've read, every book on whatever? It's like, are you trying to download it in that instance? Or are you willing enough to say, let me take my time. Let me use wisdom. Let me respond with caution, so that I'm bringing conviction to you and freedom to them.
Yeah. And look, and there's a way in which, I know we're, Adrian, Oscar and I are like this, but there is an aspect that I wonder about too, in the people who, again, if you come ready, you know what I mean? There's a way in which that the question I have is, I wonder, for some people, is this to prove that you are not like them?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
A lot of the time, that's a really hard truth. And it takes a lot of excavation, a lot of heart check. And I love this space for that reason, to be checked in that way. And I think not only that, not only proving something about one's own self, but just honestly the righteous anger at the decades of complacency
Sure.
and you know, power imbalance and saying no more. I won't be a part of this anymore, you know. And I just so appreciate that you are bringing us back again and again to Jesus's ministry, which, you know, he built the kingdom and continues to do so one person at a time.
Amen.
And the
Mhm.
value of each individual person was never lost on him, but it is often
Yeah.
lost on me. And I was a part of a conversation in a book group at my church where a man who was an elder of the church was, you know, kind of, it was getting you know, into a little bit more of a tense part of the conversation, and
Mhm.
he shared that his granddaughters had recently called him a racist.
Yes.
And
Yes.
God just captured my heart in that moment, you know, just to truly grieve for that man and just to understand completely that that was no way to move the needle in his heart about anything in terms of
Mm.
loving his brother. And
Yes.
like we don't want to lose someone in the process of helping them, you know, find their way. We don't want to lose them
Yes.
further. And
And
so,
it's man, it's the arrogance of the now too,
oh
right? Like I say
man,
this all the time. Like people are like, well, if I was around when all this was happening, I wouldn't have been a slave owner. I would have, if I was the black people, I was like, I wouldn't have let them use me as a slave. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think so, bro. Sorry. So the arrogance of the now is like, I've got this figured out, and you guys made these mistakes. And I always tell people, you got to give people a break, because again, it's not that we excuse it because they're products of the culture, right? They still had the opportunity to make decisions, but you got to at least kind of understand, like, if I was in that situation, I'm not sure that I would respond differently, given the amount of given the culture that I was growing up in, right? If I grew up in small town Mississippi, during, you know, Jim Crow and whatnot, I probably, if, not me, let's say I'm a white person, I probably would have gone along with most of it because everybody around me was doing it. Right now, again, that doesn't excuse it, but it at least gives us a sense of, I understand that I might have done that, so let me show you some grace. It's the unrepentant servant, right? The story of Jesus, like, you know, we have been forgiven much, and so we should also forgive others, right? We should recognize that we've been in this situation before, or in other ways, and so the grace, and I guess that's where we come to, right? So
and that's
it's good.
what's
You
so
probably got more
unique.
questions, but
Yeah, I
yeah.
do. And but that is what is so unique about this space and about the dialogue of racial reconciliation in Christ and in, you know,
Mm,
in Christianity. That is
that's
what is
good.
so
Yeah.
unique about it, is that we're always
Yeah.
anchored in that. We're always anchored in the
Yeah.
fact that each of us are grafted in.
Mm.
And
We are
to not lose
convicted
that.
every time in it.
Yes. Well, we'll do one more question and then we'll talk to our viewers a little bit about what is the Threaded Collective. So, last question before the commercial break. What do you do when you realize you're talking to somebody who just wants to fight?
Ah. Oh man. You know, I think for a long time I thought that I had to stay in it. You know what I mean? Like it was my Christian moral responsibility to stay in the moment. Like there was something unchristian about leaving the moment. And to Oscar's point, like um there may be some long-term work that needs to be done in this person's life, and I don't know if I'm getting it done in this moment. There may be a time where I need to kind of move on, and say this is not the moment for this, or this person isn't quite ready. And we see this in the scripture. You're gonna, you know, when it's talking about, he talks about kind of, you know, evangelism, if you will, where you're like, hey, you're gonna throw the seeds out, and you're gonna find, some are gonna find concrete, some are gonna find places with weeds, some are gonna find you know, soil that's ready to receive the word. And I think that that's the same way in this conversation. Like sometimes you're going to throw some stuff out, and some is going to be just concrete. They're not ready for it at all. And that's where you'll see Jesus. There's a couple of places in the scripture Jesus is like, hey, come in there and bring the stuff. If the spirit is not resting in there, like dust your feet off and keep it moving, right? Or, you know, remove your blessing from this place. Or you know, don't throw your pearls to swine, because they will take what you said, they'll trample on it, and then they'll come and attack you. And I've been in that situation personally, where I've tried to stay in with people, And they've literally taken words that I've said, whether in like a preaching or something, or some sort of word, and they'll twist it and they'll throw it back at me, and it'll be basically trampling under their feet. And then they'll come after me and attack me, or something I've said on the show, whatever. And I think there's moments where you just go, I don't think this is the moment, right? My time has not yet come, if you will, for this. I'm gonna keep it moving. I think that's okay. And you're looking for, like, what's the tone? Like, do they have a tone in which they have a listening tone, or are they a fighting tone? You're looking for, are they asking questions, or just putting in, declarative statements or ad hominems? And are they looking to solve the problem, or are they just looking to kind of blow up stuff, right? And when I think about that, I think about tone. I think about, asking questions. And in fact, we did, I kind of call it tapping out. When do you know when to tap out? Tone, ask questions, problem solving, right? If I hear the tone and it's not good, if they're not asking questions, they're not trying to solve the problem, I just tap out and say, I'll do this another time. I'll wait till the next time. So
I can't please everyone. I can't convince everyone. I remember I was just thinking about this today. I don't know why, but I remember when I was a kid, my dad had this thing, and he wanted to buy me these good quality shoes, but they were not tennis shoes. They were not Nikes, Reeboks, or whatever. And I remember, like, I want these shoes because everyone in school has these shoes. I wanted to be just like them. There was this one kid that had this, he just poked fun at me of the shoes that I wore when I was growing up, because they were more dressy and stuff like that. And that was what my dad bought. I finally talked my dad into buying me a pair of shoes, Nike. It just so happens that I had a hoodie with the Nike logo on, and I wore that to school. And the same guy that made fun of me was walking by to go to school that day in the morning, and he turns to me and shakes his head and says, "Oh, you Nike lover." And I'm like,
you can't win.
I'm like, what the heck? It took me 30 years to literally learn that lesson. But I didn't have what you expected of me. I wasn't who you expected of me. I wasn't purchasing the products you expected of me, and I couldn't please you. And when I had everything, I still couldn't please you. I have to learn to walk away from these jokers. I can't get in the mud with you.
Mm-hmm.
And it happens with this conversation as well. You can't please them one way or another. It's their heart. I don't believe there's racism in the world. I think it's sin in the heart that reflects as racism in the world. Does that make sense? It's a heart issue. And if these guys just want to find a way to just rub you the wrong way, run. You can't please them one way or another. Save yourself some grief.
Yeah. And keep it open. I mean, obviously, if people want to come back, you're open to the conversation.
We're keeping nothing open, Marcus. If they don't... No, listen, here's the thing. And I know this is on Facebook, and people are like, that's why he hasn't called me. I just can't do this anymore. I can't run your race and please you. I went to the gym with a friend a few months ago, and we're at the treadmill, and I just have this routine, and this guy starts jogging, and I have the intuition just to keep up with him. I'm like, that's his routine. Let him run his race. And if they want to run in that direction, my old friends or whatever you want to call them, they could do so. They know where to find me if they want to come and engage with me. But there's people I just refuse to go look for.
Yeah.
No, I think that is a distinctive difference, right? I think about the rich young ruler, right? He didn't want to deal with what Jesus was doing. So he walked away, and you didn't see Jesus go, well, hold up. I know I said give all things, but let's just give 10 and see how you feel. And then we'll go from there, right? He wasn't messing with that.
Some things we can't compromise. Yeah,
you can't. There's aspects you can't, but what you said, Oscar, was good, is they know where to find me, right? And so what I think is so great about Jesus is, particularly in this conversation of like reconciliation, there's a concept of forgiveness and confession, right? We're supposed to confess, Jesus forgives. If you're not willing to confess, Jesus doesn't pull the forgiveness away and say, well, this was your chance, see you later. No, he says, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna just have a feast of forgiveness waiting for you. Because when you come back, one turkey leg is not gonna, forgiveness is not gonna cover you. Yeah, I mean, like, because you're gonna keep having problems, you're gonna keep doing things, and I just want you to know that I am ready to feed you with forgiveness. Amen. As long as it takes. Like, I'm in and I'm waiting, but I'm not gonna run after you, right? I want to practice. I want to give you the freedom that I've given you, but I'm here waiting. And I think that that's an important piece, that people can't just shut off relationships. Like, I'm not dealing with that person anymore. That's contrary to where Jesus works with us. So we can't do that to others. So
yeah. I think something that's really confused me around, somebody that seems like they just want to fight is this idea, and I think that it's a myth, is that to hold a neutral space is the Christian way to be. People that might be playing devil's advocate or refusing to fully acknowledge one side or the other because they just believe that that elevates them in some way. That keeps them out of that mud. And it hurts when I am a part of a conversation like that. It almost feels like the worst kind of fight to be in, because they're not fighting for any one person there or like any one conviction. They're just like they're like elevating themselves above the argument altogether, and that confuses me a lot. I never really know how to deal with that, and that's a kind of like fighting that devil's advocate kind of, well, I see this side, I see this side. I just never know how to respond to that.
Well, I want to say something like that to that comment you just made. A lot of the times the people that do that, it's not that they're trying to hold some ground or something, it's because they're afraid. So they use this as a mechanism. So deep down inside, their arrogance is really fueled by fear. Their arrogance or their whatever they're projecting is fueled by something that's rooted, that's broken. So it turns your heart into compassion towards them when you realize it's like, we all know the story of the little dog that's got a broken leg and you can't approach him because he'll, snap at you and try to bite you. He's hurting. You may see that as aggression, but he's being protective. So if you realize that, now you could approach that relationship with a little bit more compassion and say, I love you, man.
Yeah. And sometimes it's just an avoidance, like it's straight avoidance. It's the semantic arguments, right? Where it's just like, well, what do you mean when you say race? What do you mean when you say reconciliation? Like, what do you mean? And I'm all for questions, right? But some of the stuff, we laugh about it sometimes. It's like, you know what I mean? Stop trying to make this about the definition and let's get to the thing we're trying to go after. So sometimes it can be just distraction to kind of get you away from whatever we're talking about because they don't feel as confident to actually speak into that space. It is a tough conversation to have, like just the person who's always looking. And sometimes, and it can be insulting, right? Like we saw this in our area of the Dallas area. There's the Carroll School District, which is, I think this Carroll School District. I know there's a lot of stuff going on about South Lake and whatnot. But I think it was there in which a teacher, they were saying, hey, in a school, we need you to have a balanced approach whenever you're bringing in books or any things. And so there was a book on kind of the Holocaust. And they're like, you can't have that because the person who wrote the book doesn't have a balanced approach, they're not sitting there going, well, what if the Nazis had something going on that we needed to know about? They're not doing that. And you're like, wait, this is not a space for a balanced conversation. This is a space for a truth conversation. And so sometimes the balance can be a distractive, and sometimes people are just like, again, I think that honestly, that teacher, whoever was kind of saying, hey, we need that balanced stuff around, or that administrator, I think they were just trying to figure out like how to keep the rules that they were now getting, right? But they got caught up in this whole thing. So yeah, I'm with you. I have a hard time with that. And sometimes where it's just like, you're not actually trying to solve the problem. You're actually just having conversation for conversation's sake. And so I may just need to tap out.
Only God can give me that heart of compassion in that.
No, absolutely.
So I love that. I'm just getting preached at and getting good words tonight. I so appreciate that.
You are getting our own preaching for ourselves, right? Like this is like a group session where we're all like, hey, we're going into Thanksgiving. Like, what do we all need to hear? Can we hold each other accountable? Like we're saying it on air, right? Like people will be like my family's gonna be like, hey, I heard you your stuff. You're not modeling that at all today. Like, doggone it, she really got me on that. Yeah. So I get that for sure.
And Brian is saying maybe the person isn't fighting, they're just trying to get others to acknowledge their experiences. That can definitely also be true. So I appreciate that, Brian. Well, we are here tonight because of the Threaded Collective, and we want to take a few minutes to tell you guys what it is. And we really would love for you to join us on the inside. So Marcus, do you want to give a short plug, and I can chat a little bit too about it?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one of the things we're experiencing right now is this threaded Q&A, which is what we're doing live right now. And right now we're making it public. We're trying to kind of get some things out there, let people see what this is. But usually this kind of conversation happens inside the Threaded Collective. Now, the Threaded Collective is our inclusive, exclusive membership space. This is where those folks who really want to have good conversation, to learn, to grow in their understanding of how to be a better community weaver, to be a better change agent in the community. They're going, hey, I don't know what I don't know. Well, the Threaded Collective creates a space that you can come in and you can start to learn what you don't know, reorient around some of the things, hear conversations about people who are struggling and engaging in the same way you are. And it's a really wonderful space. Inside of that space, we've got webinars that are coming from Threaded faculty, lots of things. Oscar put one in the other day around narratives, the Hispanic narrative. We've got one, you know, we've been referencing this Tap Out webinar that's in there. There's others going in, the ABCs of CRT. There's our conference, all the most of the pieces from our conference in there. So there's hours upon hours of content that's there to help you become a better community weaver. And what happens is we keep adding to it. So as new things are coming along, as we're learning new things, as they're having new conversations in the world, we're adding content that will help you go out and be the best community changer that you can be. So people can come in. It's a great deal. It's $10 a month. $10 a month to have access to, right now, there's close to 50 hours of amazing stuff in there. And there's going to be more as we go along. $10 a month, or you can buy it annually at $100, which saves you 2 months, right? So you get 2 months free. It's a great, great tool. We're excited about more that's coming. I'm in conversations with people around the country who are going to come and be dropping in some new stuff. Man, I've got a Christmas thing that I'm really working on right now. I'm really excited about next steps. I just recorded one about next steps for those who are trying to do it. I've got other next steps coming. It's going to be great. Like we say, we're going to put one in there, but I'm in the mode right now. I'm telling you, I'm dropping in more stuff. It's going to be
Watch
awesome.
out. I love that, Marcus. No, it is
Yes.
incredible content. And I kind of came into it through the Threaded groups. They have learning groups through their curriculum, which is called The Journey, which you can check out at wearethreaded.org and look into their small group curriculum. This is something that you don't have to be a collective member to take advantage of. You can bring it into your church and get the ball rolling with some really rich, scripturally based conversations around race, around what scripture has to say about reconciliation and race, because it has a lot to say about these things. And
yes, absolutely.
This is, a pivotal mission of the church. And if your church is looking to get involved in that way, that's an amazing way. That was my entry point. And I kind of had my ear to the ground, was following Threaded and tuned into their conference, which was so much content that I couldn't even get to it all. And so I was just thinking to myself, man, there's no way, even they gave us like an extra 60 days to watch it or something. I still didn't have enough time. And so when Threaded announced this collective, I was like, and I found out that the conference material was going to be on there. I was like, well, this just makes sense from the standpoint of catching up on that really rich material from the speakers that you had there. But it has been above and beyond that in terms of like your monthly material that you're dropping, and just being able to keep this fire alive, because I am like in a majority white space. I know that the Lord has just placed this on my heart, and I can't always find community around this in my actual community, not to mention the isolation of COVID. So I was looking for that. I was looking for people whose hearts were on fire for this as well, who could instruct me and keep me engaged and accountable, that I'm not dropping the ball on this mission that I feel like the Lord has given me. And I've been so grateful for that. So not even, touching on like the value that I get out of that $10 a month and the kind of continual community and accountability, there's just a sense that I'm contributing to something that's really important. As a white person, I just wouldn't know. Like you talked about, you don't know what you don't know. I wouldn't know, and I wouldn't be where I am. God wouldn't have had the capacity, like he wouldn't have worked in my heart if it weren't for the lived experiences and shared stories of people of color. The time that so many people across the years have taken to share their experiences with me. And time after time, I had no capacity to thank them. They don't, to pay them back for that. And so to have the opportunity to invest in any way in this brave, good work of reconciliation that so many people are doing, it's an honor. And for $10 a month, I'm just getting a whole lot more than I bargained for in the best possible way.
I love it. Well, hey, we always love to hear from people who are inside doing it. We think we're creating stuff. We're like, this is good. But if they're like, they're like, this isn't that good. Or if they're like, so it's good. You're going, this is good. This is helpful. So I love hearing it. And yeah, if I see, in the text, we've got, hey, this, we got Brian here saying, might need to try some of this for more, get some more details. So if you go to wearethreaded.org/collective, COLLECTIVE, I'm really excited that I just like rattled that off pretty quick. Wearethreaded.org/collective. You can find out how to get that annual membership for $100 and save yourself 2 months. And again, with that, you get all this stuff, but there's also some discounts and things that come for certain events and stuff we have coming up. So it's definitely worth the price. So I'm glad you're a part. I want more people to be a part.
Awesome. Well, we are having such a great Q&A tonight. We've already had some really good thoughts and questions from people who pre-submitted. You can still drop their questions in the chat. If you can make sure to subscribe to the Threaded channel just to stay up to date on our latest Threaded content. We're going to roll into just the second part of our Q&A, and I'm going to propose that we do this a little bit more rapid fire.
What she's saying is y'all don't talk so much. I love Adrian. That's so it's absolutely okay. We're okay with that. And look, we are going to the second part. So if you are on here and you want to share this with us, just click the share button. Let people know. Jump in this conversation. This is fun. This is how we grow, is on the words and the affirmations of others. So sorry, Adrian. Thank you. No. We will be more rapid fire.
You're doing great. I'm going to pose it to like one or the other of you, and feel free to jump in on either one. But I'll just kind of direct it that way so we can maybe get through the last 6 questions that we have.
I love it.
Plus whatever comes up in the chat. We'll see. We'll give it a go. So Oscar, the possibility for racially insensitive language at a holiday gathering has always been there, but this Thanksgiving, even more of us are concerned about these conversations than ever. So why do you think that this is such a big deal? Why does it feel like a bigger deal now than ever that we are attending to our language?
I think we've seen the consequences of it. I think that we're realizing the effect for the past, since 2016. I think this holiday has probably been in jeopardy, right? So we've been looking at this thing year after year. It's like, oh my goodness, it's getting worse. So I think we realized what it could occur if we just allow that to continue. So we're trying to do the best we can to change it.
Yeah.
And I think there's millennials like yourself who have been working on this, and I think they're ready to step up and are ready to say certain things. And so they don't want to repeat the issues of the past. And so people are coming to the conversation more. And we didn't have it really. I mean, people had it last year, but a lot of people didn't. I think this is a divisive time. There's also space that has been given for people of color to speak out more. I think more white people have grabbed onto the concept. And so you have more homes in jeopardy across the nation. And the interracial marriage rate is going up. Biracial children are the fastest growing demographic in the space. And so they got questions, they need answers. So there's a lot of different reasons. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of different reasons. What do you guys think? Marcus, tell me if you think every church should be trying to be an ethnically diverse church, and is it wrong for churches to just be one race?
Wait, it's not fair. You said this is rapid fire. There's no way we could answer that one as a this is a whole segment. We need a whole seminar for this one.
Well, hey, luckily, in the threaded learning groups, there's kind of a whole section of which you're talking about this in some way. So if you want to have more conversation, you can do it. Maybe I'll create get somebody to create a webinar on this as well. But it's a question I got recently. So I'll try to do a real rapid fire. I don't know if it's a sin. I don't know if it's wrong. And I think the question is, why does it exist? And why are people continuing to do it? Right. There's something in the homogeneity that provides a kind of comfort for the people who are doing it. I think you can't say that it's wrong. It's kind of foundationally, because if you're in rural China and you're saying this needs to be an ethnically diverse space, the diversity will be maybe different, maybe different Asian countries that may be close, I guess, but probably real China is going to be mostly Chinese folks. So it can't be wrong to do it. But you want to think diversely and sort of, other backgrounds, whether it's economic or, demographics, those kinds of things. So I don't think it's wrong, but I do think it begs the question, like, why do we do it? Part of it, and Oscar, you can speak to this as well, is there are some places that need to be created because it's just easier to understand what God is saying in your heart language. So language is a big thing, particularly in the United States. If you're going to come and you're from Mexico and Spanish is your first language and you want to worship God and you're like, hey, somebody says you need to go to an English speaking church. It's like tying two hands behind your back and trying to do it, right? Like, it's just not, you don't get to do it in your heart language. So I think there's a space for language churches for sure. What we know, and Oscar can probably speak to this again, is once you get to that second, third generation, those kids, they like Spanish, but they want some English too, right? So I don't think you have to stop there and say, well, now that we've created this as a Spanish church, that it's got to stay that way. I think you got to open up the doorway to let other people in, because at the end of the day, we're all going to actually be together worshiping God, right? That's Revelations 7, 9, and 5, 9, right? Like, we're all going to be together. So we're prepping people for what they need to be about. The hard part is, I think ethnic spaces also are a kind of protection for people, Black people particularly. Like, this is a space that we want to protect because it's kind of the only place that we feel like we can be fully ourselves. What we need is to be creating churches that people can feel fully themselves in the midst of the gospel. And man, if that's diverse, that's fantastic. If not, it may be just because the environment doesn't care for it. So that's all I'll say on that. That's all I'll say.
Do I get a chance to swing at this?
Please do.
Yeah, please swing. Just swing. Because you would be the one. You know this even better, right?
We've tried to launch our English service like 4 times and we've failed. It's harder than you think. We are more than intentional of trying to bring diversity into our church, not only in the congregational, but the staff and so on. It's hard. People have asked me, why do you teach the kids in the kids' rooms in English and not in Spanish if this is a Hispanic church? Because my job is not to teach them culture or language. My job is to teach them the gospel. And for them to mature in their discipleship, for them to grow to be people that love God more and love their neighbor the way they love themselves. And if I have to use their native tongue, which is now English for them, because that's where they go to school, that's where their friends gather and all this stuff happens socially, well, I'm going to use whatever native tongue they have so that I could promote this. But this is a conversation that churches need to have. In fact, I had a conversation with a couple of pastors just this weekend where they said, we've noticed that American or English-speaking churches are dying out in our neighborhoods, and they're handing us the keys to buildings so we could continue. And that's a great question. I said, that's a great question. But you're looking back and you're looking at the demographic change of those neighborhoods, and that's why they're dying out. But you're not asking the follow-up question, what's our problem as Hispanic churches? And they're like, well, we don't know. I told them, our children are leaving our churches that we've planted and led through because they're going to affluent churches that are all over the neighborhood. And you could, in Plano, you could name a good handful of them. I won't do that. And it's like, why are we losing our children? Because we're stubborn enough that we're doing the same mistake that our predecessors did.
Wow.
And we have to be careful with this. We planted Vivid Life Church in 2016, and people would ask me, why did you put an English speaking or an English name to the church? I'm like, well, because one day we will be a multicultural church. We're starting off with Spanish, but we will have this. And I don't know how to do this. To be honest with you, like I said, 4 times I've attempted and 4 times I've failed. But I'm not ashamed of saying that. It's a pursuit that's worth my failure.
Wow.
I'll fail as many times as I have to so that I could learn the lesson, but it's going to get done because it's in the DNA of the church that God planted for us, that he's flourished. I just don't know how to do it yet. So if anyone has any advice, give me a holler.
Praise God. I think something that you're bringing up there is motive. And that's the first thing that comes to my mind with the first part of this question. Do you think every church should be trying to be an ethnically diverse church? My first question I want to ask is, it depends. What's your motive? What's your motive for becoming an ethnically diverse church? Because if that's not right, I don't think you should start trying for it. And And I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know that I won't continue on that line. I don't know if that needs to be elaborated anymore. But
I have
Well-
to say something to that, because here's the thing. A lot of ministries are doing this, and they're bringing in the Spanish, the Asian, or the whatever other community, Indian community, and there's a ceiling for them.
yeah,
If you're not willing to do something radical, which is not build a ministry that'll be under your umbrella, but bring in leadership to co-lead the church, you need elders that are diverse. You need staff that is diverse. You need people that could move back and forth. So yeah, the motive is right. We want to get this there's this, the demographic is growing around our neighborhood. We got to capture that market. Yeah, well, if that's the motive, don't
Instead
do
of
it.
run from that market, we capture it. We go after that market.
But there's
I hate using the word market, right? But you go after those people who are in your space, as opposed to, oh, the neighborhood's changing. Let's just go somewhere else where everybody seems to be moving, right?
Yeah.
I agree with that. And to your point, the motive, I always say diversity is not the end, it's a means to an end, right? We tend to shoot for diversity, but we miss the big value of diversity, which is in diversity, we actually get to know more about who God is, right? We get to, because he is imaged in diversity. We get to know more about, we get to learn more about ourselves, like what part do we play in the bigger picture of the mission of God? And we get to know more about the world, this world that God created for all of us to enjoy together. Shutting out diversity or in bringing in diversity opens up our opportunity to experience more of what this beautiful earth has to offer to us that other cultures have found in different places, right? So I think to the motive is big, what you're talking about, Adrian.
And this is part of our discipleship. If every church should adopt this, not as a vision, but process of discipleship. My job is to teach people to love God more, help them love God more, and love their neighbor. So it's a part of the discipleship, not part of the vision of the church where we're going to be 20 years from now.
That's good.
Amen. And if your church is tackling this issue, or it's on your heart, or it's part of the conversation at your church, I just can't recommend the small group learning curriculum enough of the journey. This is actually the question that basically ends on, is what does a true multicultural church look like? And just presenting us this challenge that, and what is your motive? And it's not as simple as simply like diversifying your, who's in your pew. Exactly, to Oscar's point, it has everything to do with all of the spaces that these different cultures are reflected in the church. So there's a lot to be said on that. I agree. It's totally unfair to put that in the rapid fire, but let's try again. This one's for you, Oscar. The question is, I've seen many cultures that have a picture of Jesus that represents their culture, like a Black Jesus, Korean Jesus, etc. Do you think that this is helpful or hurtful?
You're asking the guy that, half of Mexico's named Jesus. So, so it's funny because we're naming our kids after Jesus in the Hispanic community. I don't know. I think, he was definitely, he didn't have blue eyes, and, he didn't have blonde hair, and there's a more cultural image, I think, that we could probably maybe relate to, but I think there's this stigma of breaking that image that someone else established that is so hard to sometimes, who are you to now paint the new picture of Jesus, right? So is it harmful? I don't know. I think it is, but I don't know why. Mm-hmm. I wish my gut says yes, but my brain says, but explain it. And I just don't have that.
Are these just different forms of appropriating, really? It's not that we don't know what culture and, ethnic group he was.
Certainly. Yeah.
I think it speaks to this recognition that when you talk about Jesus, there's kind of two Jesuses. There's kind of in the sense of there's the particular Jesus and the universal Jesus, right? So you have Jesus that is particular. He existed in a particular time, in a particular place, in the midst of a particular ethnic group, in the midst of a particular society. And that's important that we recognize that, because it helps us understand even some of the things that he's talking about, right? Like if you get contextually, you're listening and you're understanding, you're trying to figure out, okay, why did he say that? Well, if you understand that his audience, if you understand his audience, you understand what he's going through, then you hear it. Like there's a reason why he talks about the kingdom. He talks about the kingdom of God, or really what Matthew says is the kingdom of heaven. Part of it, he's helping them. Matthew says the kingdom of heaven because he's talking to Jews, And the Jews had expected him to bring this kingdom to earth. And so Matthew's saying, hey, Jews, because of the culture, you are, when we say kingdom, we're not talking about that Jesus is coming to build a kingdom here, but he's the kingdom that's in heaven, right? It will be continuous. So anyway, the contextual understanding, particular aspect of who Jesus is and where he existed is super important. Also because if we truly understand where he was, then it keeps us from, when we start to go to the universal Jesus, taking the universal Jesus and making him the only version. So we can look at, our pictures of Jesus in the Western context, particularly America, and we'll see that we've got this white Jesus. We've got this, in some ways, blonde hair, blue-eyed, brown hair, blue-eyed, pale skin, brown hair, brown-eyed. I mean, whatever it is, it's a very European Jesus. And part of that is because people did grab it, and they started to, as most people, as it talks about universal, is they start to go, they make Jesus in their own image, right? And so, and part of that is good, because what it speaks to in the universal is that Jesus can actually exist in every place. The gospel of who Jesus is available to everyone. And so to see like a Chinese Jesus goes, okay, they see Jesus as somebody who is for them, right? And so that's a beautiful thing universally. But when that image becomes the thing in which you start to place the particularisms of Jesus on, that's when it's dangerous, right? And that's what we saw in the Western flow of where Christianity went, is that the white Jesus became a image of their own sinfulness about supremacy. They thought white is supreme, so we actually can't make Jesus Jewish because we couldn't worship anybody who was less than us, right? And so Jesus got oxidated from Jerusalem to DC in such a way that you could actually worship him and follow him because he's like me. And that's the dangerous piece. And look, I've heard Ku Klux Klan members say, we are a Christian organization, but we don't like Black people and we don't like Jews. And I was like, wait, so they forgot the particular understanding of who Jesus is in his very particular person. They went too far into the universal. So so I think both are good. You just have to have a healthy dose of it. And I think the church in Western society has lost the particular pieces, which I think actually really help with some of the racial spaces too. That helps us understand more about what's going on in the context of the New Testament. And
I want to say one thing, which I think is very important to my heart. We have this conversation regarding what Jesus should look like, and we realize what we just heard right now. It's true, right? But Matthew 25 talks about, hey, I was in prison and you didn't visit me. Mm-hmm. I was here and I was there and I was in these situations and you didn't. And then this is what they say. When were you in prison? I didn't recognize you as someone that was captivated by, guards, and you were in prison for a period of time. So we're looking at this thing with this desire to see a universal Jesus that reflects the culture and the context that he appeared in, but we're missing out that Jesus is in so many other places, and we're missing out that Jesus in my brother across the street that maybe hasn't had a meal in a couple of days because they're elderly and they're on a very tight fixed income, and Jesus is going to hold me accountable to that recognition, not the skin recognition in certain cases, but the hard recognition of my brothers in need. So this conversation is important, but let's not minimize the importance of recognizing what Jesus said that was going to happen. People were going to recognize him. And then other people would say, when did I visit you in jail? What are you talking about? When did I feed you when you were hungry? When you did this to the least of them. We got to capture that.
Yeah. And that's the universal and the particular. The universal is Jesus came to die for everyone. But he lived a very particular way. Yeah. He lived as the marginalized. And I'm hoping to do a Christmas thing on this at some point. But, he put himself in the most vulnerable position possible as a baby, right? I always say it. He left his gated community, came down to the hood, the earth, put himself as a baby in a teen pregnancy, had to leave as a refugee from a power authority trying to kill all the people who were his age. Left as a refugee, lived in another space. When they came back, he actually moved into a neighborhood that most people would go, can anything good come out of there? And allowed those people in that neighborhood to rear him and raise him and to help him understand life. And we didn't see him for, there was 12 years where we didn't see anything about him. He popped up We got a little bit, and then he disappeared for another 15, 16 years. But in the midst of that, he was living amongst the marginalized. So does it surprise us at all when he appears on the scene, Luke 4, and he gets into the synagogue and he has to open up the scroll to read? He reads Isaiah, where it says, I come to bring freedom to the poor, or freedom to the captives, to bring good news to the poor. Like, of course, he's going to talk about the marginalized. And isn't it surprising in Matthew 25, where he says, when you do things for the least of these, you're actually doing it for me, because he identifies so distinctly with the marginalized. And don't get me started, although you did, I can take a whole thematic sort of process through the scriptures, and you can see how God has a kind of partiality and a kind of favoritism, if you will, to those who don't have power. That doesn't mean he didn't die.
Yeah. That
doesn't mean he didn't die for everybody, but that's a particular thing that he did to let the marginalized know that they have a God who loves them, even though it doesn't look like it, because they don't have all the stuff everybody else has. But he also did it so the rich can never say, we don't have to deal with those people. Right.
Amen. And Mary herself recognized that when you read her Magnificat. Yes. She understood who her God was by choosing her. So beautiful. Well, to close us out, we're going to hit hard. I'm going to open this up to both of you. Current events. Here's our question. I keep hearing that the Kyle Rittenhouse case is about race. What do you think about that?
You go first, Marcus.
I can't believe, like, this is nuts, though, this question. Well, in the sense that it'll take forever. Let me try to just, okay. It is, in the very basis understanding of the question, it is not about race, in the sense of there are no racial characters, like there are no different characters in the story, right, that are race. The issue I think people are dealing with is the scenario and the precedent, right? The scenario is problematic. Or the scenario is problematic because we have seen people who are unarmed maneuvering through spaces, getting shot, and not having anything done in the midst of it. We have seen people of color who get shot for just saying that there's a gun in the car, that they get killed for that, right? Maybe even prosecuted because they had gun or they had drugs or something. And we have this white child, 17, running around the streets with an assault rifle, kills 3 people, and none of the charges go through. And so it just begs the question, like, would this have happened if this person was a person of color? And again, most people want to go, this is an isolated incident, but most of the time when we're talking about these things, we're starting to, if race is brought into it, we're trying to see it as a product of a longer conversation. We're just asking the question, like, in situations historically, if we'd seen Black people do this, it would have been a problem. Now, that's not fully true, right? Like, Black Panthers used to drive around with guns in the streets as well, following police officers, but they were doing it to make police officers weren't hurting Black people. In this situation, so I think people are just questioning that. But I also look at it as a conversation around precedents, which is where the race conversation comes in, is if it's okay for a 17-year-old boy to run to a protest with an AR rifle, run around, shoot 3 people, and then get off, then the problem is precedent. That means that maybe there's others who go, oh, I can go to a protest that I don't agree with. I can carry my gun. I can start some ruckus. And if it gets out of control and I feel threatened, I shoot people and I can get off. Now, in this country, it did not start this way. But in this country, a lot of the protests, particularly we're having right now, are going to be about people of color, and a lot of people of color will be a part of it. So now, as a person of color, we're going, you're saying that you can allow that it's okay for potentially a 17-year-old person with an AR to run through my protest, shoot me, and get away with it. I don't like the precedent of that, because we have seen that historically in this country with people of color anyway. If they get out of line, then militias are allowed to be created. to run after them, to kill them, to stop their movement, to try to for freedom, all those kinds of things. So the precedent is a little bit of a scary precedent. So again, I think there may be stronger arguments about race to have. I think we're going to have one. We've got Ahmaud Arbery coming here pretty soon. I think we're going to have plenty to talk about. So I'm not spending as much time on Kyle Rittenhouse, but I'm understanding, and I'm nervous about the precedent as a person of color who tends to not. I don't tend to protest, but when I protest, I'm worried about the precedent. I think people are looking for a reason to run in there with guns and take matters into their own hands. And this is not a Marvel movie or a DC movie where you have a vigilante who has a good moral code, right? Like that won't kill people. This is a person who's 17, whose brain hasn't even fully understood all the things that's going on. So I don't like it. And it reminds us of I cannot conjure this cat's name. Why can't I remember? All I keep thinking of is Tamir Rice, and that is not what I'm thinking of. It's literally the situation that launched all this stuff into Black Lives Matter in Florida. What's that? No, stand your ground. I'm so sorry to anybody. People know it. If you're on the chat and you know what I'm talking about, it is the case that started all of this stuff. It's the young boy with the hoodie who's got the Skittles, and I can't remember his name. You know who he is. This is me not getting a lot of sleep, and for whatever reason, Trayvon Martin. Yes. Oh, that would have bothered me forever. It's the Trayvon Martin case. That guy who went after, and I won't even name his name because I probably couldn't conjure it anyway, who went and started a fight with Trayvon because he thought of him as suspicious. Trayvon gave him more than he could handle, and then he shot Trayvon because he was losing this fight that he started, and he got off of it because of the rule of stand your ground in Florida. That's the precedent that we're watching with this Rittenhouse case that we're a little worried about. Trayvon Martin. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I want to add. I don't think I'm smart enough to say, is this a racial issue that we're watching unfold here in this decision and so on. I think there's more of an urgency inside of me. I'm a father of a 15-year-old. This young boy, regardless of what he did, he was 17 years old. What was being infiltrated in that home? What was being communicated? As parents, I think we have a responsibility to talk about this conversation more freely with our children so that we educate them in love, especially if you're a Christ follower. Instead of allowing the public media, from social platforms to CNN, MSNBC, and everyone else to form an opinion in our young generation's mind to then go out and do something, regardless if it's good or bad. Right now, I don't think I'm smart enough to determine where the whole, legal scenario that the kid was in. Where are the parents is what I'm asking. Are we promoting this? I mean, where do you get the money as a 17-year-old? I remember the first car I bought, the first car I purchased, literally I raised the money and it took me a long time. And my dad said, I'm going to buy the car for you. You're going to go with me. I'm going to pick the car that you're going to have. It's a great engine. It's going to work perfectly for you. Mm-hmm. How do you go to the store and pick up it's an impulse item, right? Where are the parents? It's like we keep pulling up layers, and it's all this stuff that's floating around that we allow them to take in and then form ideas and then go out and do this thing. So I don't think I'm smart enough to say, is this a race thing? This is a parent issue too. It's like, where are the parents on all this thing? Were they on court? Did they stand? Yes. Were they there? I mean, did they have accusations against them or anything like that?
I mean, were they? Yeah.
They do have their own trial?
No, your question is, were they on trial?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They weren't on trial. They were at the trial. Yeah, they were there.
The kid's 17.
Yeah.
It's like you said, he's not fully developed. He doesn't know what he's doing, right? His mind hasn't, made decisions yet. He's going off the cuff, right? And, where are the parents? Are we teaching our children? Are we filtering some of these things that are being said widely around the media? And to be honest, quite honest with you, media is influencing all of us.
Yeah.
I agree with you. And everything that you're saying, that he's a 17-year-old boy, he's still a child. And speaking of the media, when is the last time they called a 17-year-old Black man a child? That I just couldn't even not finish that Black man.
That's
and
good.
that's why these things are continually racially
Yeah.
tinged and racially influenced and racially biased,
Yeah.
because they won't have the luxury. One of my dearest friends, like one of the most profound conversations I had with her, we have children young, preschool age, same age. It was an off the cuff conversation. We were getting coffee. She said, I was just in Hobby Lobby. The woman in front of me turned around and told me how beautiful my babies were. And all I could think at that moment was, are you still going to be saying that in 10 years? You gonna be crossing the street? And this is a lived experience that I don't have personally, but I see this happening, like just simply a matter of verbiage. But I couldn't agree with you more, Oscar. These are children, but that needs to be understood universally, regardless of skin tone. I couldn't leave this question unasked, because when it comes to Thanksgiving table, this is the hot
It's going to be
topic.
there.
So I'm sorry to kind of close us out on something where there's so much more to say. But I know in particular, we're here in the Threaded Collective to have these conversations to answer your questions specifically. I also want to refer you to a colored commentary where Marcus and Antoine do get very specific with current events and really get into the nuance there. I always get so much out of that. You can subscribe to that wherever you get your podcast, and also follow them on YouTube. And we would just love to thank you for joining us tonight. It's been such a rich conversation. We wish you the happiest Thanksgiving, and we would love for you to head to wearethreaded.org/collective to join the collective community. And next month, we will be back to host another Q&A conversation, so look out for the details. Oscar and Marcus, thank you so much. I hope you guys have a great Thanksgiving.